Brazil arrived as five-time champions, the team the whole bracket feared. 90 minutes later, they were the biggest shock of the tournament. Everyone saw Haaland's 2 goals, but the real story is what Brazil failed to do before Norway punished them. Brazil did not just lose to Norway. Brazil lost the moment this match stopped being about talent and became about pressure. Norway did not need to look like the better football nation for 90 minutes. They only needed to survive long enough for the most dangerous finisher on the pitch to get his moment. Brazil's exit is being reported as their worst World Cup finish since 1990. Their title drought is now in its 24th year, and the manager hired to bring control, Carlo Ancelotti, just watched his side go out in the last 16. For Brazil, the World Cup is never just a tournament. It is memory, expectation, identity. Every cycle begins with the same question: is this finally the team that brings the 6th star? And when this match reached its most important moments, Brazil had the ball, the chances, the noise, but Norway had the punishment. The scoreline says Norway 2, Brazil 1. But the scoreline hides the real tension. Brazil did not spend the match looking harmless. They pushed, they attacked, they forced Norway into uncomfortable defending. They had an early penalty chance. They had moments around the box. They had the kind of pressure that usually makes a favorite feel safe. But pressure is only safe when it becomes a goal. That is where the game started to tilt. Every missed chance changed the emotional temperature. Every save gave Norway one more minute to believe. Every failed Brazilian attack made the bracket feel a little less stable. And this is the part people miss. Norway did not have to win the whole match. They had to win the right moments. In knockout football, that is often enough. At first, Brazil looked like the team controlling the story. But control can be an illusion. A favorite can have possession and still lose control. A favorite can create danger and still lose belief. A favorite can look one goal away from survival, while the opponent is quietly waiting for one mistake. That was Norway's path. They did not need to turn the match into chaos immediately. They only needed to keep Brazil from turning pressure into certainty. Because the longer Brazil stayed frustrated, the more the match stopped being technical and started becoming psychological. This is where the risk meter changed. Brazil were not just chasing a goal. They were chasing calm. Then came the part that makes Norway different. Most underdogs need a perfect match. Norway needed a perfect finisher. Haaland changes the math because he does not need volume. He does not need 20 touches. He does not need his team to dominate territory for long stretches. He needs the ball to arrive in a dangerous place once, then again. And suddenly, the entire story flips. That is why this defeat hurts Brazil so badly. Because Brazil's missed chances created the pressure. But Haaland gave that pressure a final shape. One finish tells Brazil, "You should have killed this game earlier." A second finish tells the whole tournament. The bracket is no longer protected by reputation. This was the brutal difference between pressure and punishment. Brazil created pressure. Norway delivered punishment. But this was not only about one striker. The deeper question is why Brazil keep arriving at these knockout moments with talent and leaving with explanations. That is the uncomfortable pattern. Brazil often look dangerous enough to win. But when the game tightens, something changes. The passes become a little rushed. The finishing becomes a little heavier. The expectation becomes visible. And against a team like Norway, that matters. Because Norway did not play like a team overwhelmed by Brazil's name. They played like a team that understood the assignment. Stay alive, stay compact, wait for the moment, trust the finisher. That is how a giant gets dragged into a different type of match. Not a beauty contest, not a talent contest, a pressure test. And Brazil failed the pressure test. This is where the Ancelotti question begins. but it should not become a simple blame game. The point is not that one manager personally lost Brazil the World Cup. The point is bigger. Brazil built this project to solve a recurring problem: how to turn elite talent into knockout control, how to stay calm when the bracket becomes dangerous, how to avoid another exit where the world says Brazil had enough players to win, but not enough answers when the match turned. And against Norway, that solution did not appear. The system produced pressure. It produced moments. It produced enough danger to make Brazil believe, but it did not produce the goal that changes everything before Haaland did. That is the autopsy. Not Brazil had no talent, not Brazil did nothing. The problem is worse. Brazil had enough to survive, and still did not survive. Then there is Neymar. His late penalty gave Brazil a final line in the match, but not a rescue. And because of his age, his history, and everything he has carried for Brazil, the image felt bigger than the score. It was not just a goal. It felt like a possible closing frame for an era that never got the World Cup ending it wanted. But this video is not about turning Brazil's exit into a farewell montage. Neymar is the symbol, not the cause. The cause is what happened before the final emotion. Brazil had chances. Brazil had pressure. Brazil had time. And Norway still walked out with the future. This is why the result matters beyond Brazil. When Brazil disappear from a World Cup bracket, the entire tournament feels different. Every surviving team sees a different path. Every favorite looks at the empty space and thinks, maybe this side of the bracket is open now. Every underdog sees proof that reputation does not protect anyone. That is the real chaos. Norway did not just eliminate Brazil. They changed the emotional map of the tournament. A giant is gone. A path is open. And the teams still alive now have to ask the same question Brazil failed to answer. What happens when pressure arrives? Because once one favorite falls, the next one starts to feel the weight. France, England, Argentina, Portugal, Spain. Whoever stands in the bracket now knows the same thing. Talent is not a shield. History is not a shield. Possession is not a shield. In this World Cup, the team that survives the pressure writes the next chapter. So, did Haaland send Brazil out? Yes. But not because the story was only about 2 goals. Haaland sent Brazil out because Norway survived long enough for his goals to matter. Brazil created danger, but could not convert it into control. Norway absorbed the pressure, waited for the crack, and punished it with elite precision. That is why this result feels so violent. It was not just an upset. It was a verdict. Brazil's aura did not break in one shot. It cracked with every missed chance, every minute of growing pressure, every moment Norway stayed alive. And then Haaland finished the investigation. Brazil is gone. The bracket is open. And the next giant is already standing under the same pressure. So the real question now is, who breaks next? If you want the next World Cup breakdown, subscribe to World Cup Chaos Lab, because the chaos did not end with Brazil. It just found its next target.